discover my homes everywhere. Home is a breathing, home is a wind, blowing the trail far, far away. Home is the knowledge heaven is near. Home's the end of the fray.
When the dawn breaks up and the morning sends the sun high in the sky, who would hide from heaven's glory? Who would pass the challenge by? La 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 la.
There's a morning for every nation when the sun's high in the sky. There's a time for every people to affirm their destiny. La 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 la. Even so, all of us together can create a better land. Leave the past, a new tomorrow waits for all who understand. There's a morning for every nation when the sun's high in the sky. There's a time for every people to affirm their destiny. La 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 la. La 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 la. Even so, all of us together can create a better land. Leave the past, a new tomorrow waits for all who understand. La 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 la. Leave the past, a new tomorrow waits for all who understand.
I remember I went with Mr. Kartikayan to see Abdul Kalam when he was the president. And Mr. Kalam asked me, how do you find India now? I had first come to India in 1958, before some of you were born. And I met many saints then. In this time, I have not met saints, and I have been surprised. But I said to him, he said, how do you like what is happening to India? I said, India needs to go through this phase. India has to claim its place among the great nations of the world. But once this is over, I think India cannot but return to its roots. Its nature is to be spiritual. The destiny of India is to be the guru of the world. And it would be good if all of you could understand this and live up to that principle. I'm going to take a very different approach today to this subject of finding balance in life. Usually think, well, balance means I must do my work, I must have my dinner, I must all the different things people do. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to say that Dvaita is the principle on which God created the whole universe. And there is no balance. Dvaita is the balancing agent. There's no balance without that. There has to be that balance. When God manifested the universe, He manifested it out of Himself. This is the extraordinary thing that India's teaching has given us. Sanatana Dharma does not mean Hinduism. Sanatana Dharma is the eternal religion which has to be the same religion even in the most distant galaxy, in the most distant planet in that galaxy. There cannot be another religion in the universe because everything has come from God and everything must merge back into God. But God, it's all His consciousness. How was He able to manifest this universe? He could only do it as a vibration, the cosmic vibration of Om. He brought that, a portion of His consciousness began vibrating. Where you have vibration, you have movement in two opposite directions from a point of rest in the center. And the more you go into that movement, the more the more lack of rest you have, the more restless you become. So as a swing, if it swings this far, it has to go this far back. If it swings this far, it has to go this far back. And so with the reality of this world, the farther we swing out of contact with the infinite spirit, the more we have to swing back into the opposite end of that, so that for every happiness there is a sorrow. For every joy there is a suffering. For every light there is darkness. For male there is female. For everything it has its opposite. It cannot exist except in opposites. Thus it is that if we want to find balance in our lives, we don't want to go this way, we get completely out of balance when we go too far from our center. We must bring things back to that center of the divine within us. And this center is achieved in several ways. Neti neti, they say. Not this, not that. There's a delightful story about a man in boot camps, as they called it in America, where soldiers went to learn how to be soldiers before being sent to the World War theater in World War II. And this young man kept picking pieces of paper off the ground, throwing them down. This isn't it. This isn't it. Finally, they thought he's crazy. So they sent him to the camp psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist in his office, he kept picking up papers off the desk. This isn't it. This isn't it. Finally, the psychiatrist recommended him for a medical discharge. As soon as he got that piece of paper, he said, "This is it," and he ran out. So, this is it. The thing I want to emphasize today is not the neti neti, not this or not that. I want to emphasize what you can do in order to achieve that balance. I remember one time, this last song that you heard, in fact, though green summer fade and winter draw nigh, my Lord, in your presence, I live without fear. There was a man at Ananda who always was criticizing Ananda. And finally we said to him, do you feel you have to keep criticizing everything? He said, well, I think it's good for the community to have a gadfly. And we said, well, okay, that may be true, but what is it doing for you? And we said, look, you haven't paid your dues as a member for all the time that you've been here. You've been here 12 years. That's long enough. We're going to have to ask you from now on to start paying the dues that everybody else pays. He said, what's the alternative? You'll be asked to leave. So he was asked to leave. And he came to my house to tell me what he thought of me. And for 1 hour, he went into this long tirade. My music is absolutely ridiculous. My books are no good. I'm no good. Nothing is good. He talked like this for 1 hour. And I listened to him calmly, and I thanked him, and I let him leave quietly. But I got my frustration that I felt from all this out by writing that song. And it's a very dear song to me. It's one of my favorites. I want to say this, that the more centered you are in yourself, the more you will find that you can be creative in many, many different ways. One time Yogananda had an artist do a picture of Lahiri Mahashaya, my Param Guru. And Master didn't like it. He felt there was something missing, wisdom. And he went to the artist. He said, how long did it take you to paint this painting? He said, well, how long did it take you to learn your craft of painting? He said, it took me 20 years. And Yogananda said, 20 years to convince yourself you could paint? And the man said, oh, I'd like to see you learn as well in twice that length of time. Yogananda said, give me a week. And the man thought he was just being insulting. He left. Yogananda sat down and tuned himself to the consciousness that is needed to paint a good painting. He finished his painting. He had somebody call the artist. And the artist, when he saw it, said, who did that? It's much better than mine. Well, at least he had that honesty. But Yogananda said, you know who did it? I did. In 1 week he had learned. When you have things at their center, you have the power to create universes. When you get out of that center, you lose power, and you lose it continuously the further you get out of your own inner center. This is Ira and Pingala. I met a sadhu once. He was an old man, 132 years old. I'd say he had something to be able to live that long. But he told me I should not enjoy anything. I said, what, not even a beautiful sunset? No, nothing. I thought, what a dry approach. My guru said, you should enjoy everything with the joy of God. And this is much nicer than neti, saying everything is God, everything is God. This is the approach that I want to take today. That when you can get rid of the duality and become centered in yourself, then you will find, surprisingly, that you can accomplish a great deal more. Centeredness means to be able to understand both sides of a picture very quickly, instead of having one side here, one side there. You can't get it all together. The more centered you are in yourself, the more you will find that you can paint better, you can write better. You know, when I was a young man, I wanted to be a playwright. And I would look at a thing that I was writing, page 1, chapter 1, or act 1. I couldn't think of a thing to say. And I really got quite discouraged by this. But when I met my guru, and he taught me how to become centered in myself, and with his inspiration. I found that for example, that book that Mr. Kartikeyan was so kind to recommend, The Essence of the Bhagavad Gita, it's a very deep scripture. And I wrote the commentary on it, remembering what my guru had said. I wrote it in less than 2 months. And in those 2 months, I had to go out with people. Maybe 30 people visited me. Even so, I was able to do it. I wrote a biography of Yogananda in 3 weeks. And it's a complete biography. I just finished, and I want you to know this book today because we're especially... This is Patanjali, demystifying Patanjali. I really urge you to get this book because any book that you've read on Patanjali, you will find that it's practically not understandable. They use words like mind stuff. What do you make of mind stuff? There's so many expressions in books on Patanjali that are just intellectual hodgepodge. And I never could read Patanjali, just frankly it bored me. But somebody said to me, hey, you really should write a commentary on this because it's the yoga scripture. From ancient times, it's the only scripture of yoga. And I thought, well, I suppose I should. And I looked at it and I said, well, who's going to make any sense out of this? I don't know Sanskrit. I know a lot of Sanskrit words, but I do know when people are translating into English badly. And I knew that they were translating badly. And so I sat down to write this thing, and I tuned into my guru. That's very important to have a higher consciousness to tune into. In 3 weeks, I did the whole book, and it's called Demystifying Patanjali's Yoga Aphorisms, Yoga Sutras. You will find it amazing, this book, because suddenly you understand the whole picture of yoga. It was explained to me by my guru. It wasn't something that I came up with, but he explained it to me in such a way that it made absolute sense. When you read this book, you will finally, you will understand what yoga is all about. The different stages of yoga. You know, when he begins, he says, now we come to the subject of yoga. Now that word now is just tossed off. It's a very important word. Now means there's been a previous study, and the previous study is Sangha. There are 3 aspects of Indian philosophy that you need all 3 to understand perfectly the philosophy of India. The first is Sankhya, the next is Yoga, the third is Vedanta. Sankhya explains the why you should get out of Maya, why you should give up this attachment to this world. But it's all rational, and so it doesn't go into, there's a saying in Sankhya, Ishvara Siddha, God is not proved. But that's because it's going on to show him in other ways. You can't prove God intellectually, but through yoga you can experience him. And the teachings of yoga are absolutely wonderful when you understand them through Patanjali. And finally, when you come to Vedanta, so many people think of Vedanta as just a mental thing, intellectual game. It is not. When you have attained that oneness with Spirit, you attain, as Patanjali says, the the stages of finding God are, you first attain Sabikalpa Samadhi, and then from there you go to Nirvikalpa. And you're only free when you've attained Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And there Patanjali says, even then you're not completely free, because you've got to remember all those past incarnations, millions of them. In the state of Nirvikalpa, Jivan Mukta can see visions of his past lives and in one meditation get rid of the karma of a whole lifetime. And I asked my guru, but couldn't somebody who's in that state be free immediately and say, I'm free and be free? He said, yes, you could, but for one thing you don't care. For another thing, you use this karma to come back and help other people. Because most people, when they attain moksha, and you attain moksha only when you've gotten rid of all those memories of I as a banker, I as a pilot, I as a businessman, I as a housewife, as a cook, as all the different things human beings can be. When you've gotten rid of all those thoughts that I was in this and I was in that, and you've come to understand not only presently you have no ego, but there's no ego even in those memories. This is the whole thing you really have to overcome, is the thought of ego. Ego is not arrogance. I know a woman said to me the other day, men have more ego than women. That's untrue. Each has its own way of expressing ego. There was a woman who said, some man said to her one time, women take things too personally. She said, nonsense, I don't. Well, that's how they take things, that's how they express ego. They take it too personally. I had a very interesting experience. Years ago, somebody told me I'd written many books of secrets for this and that. And he said, a book of secrets for women would be a very good book and a good seller. I thought, well, that's obviously one I can't write. Then I thought, well, let's see. And I asked God to show me. And all of a sudden, a very feminine consciousness came over me. And I, in half an hour, wrote the whole book. And it took me about half an hour to get rid of this hypnosis that I was a woman. But after it, it's a good book. But you find that men and women do have these differences. Men are more intellectual, women go more by the heart. Men pick things apart, women put them together. I prefer, in a sense, the feminine attitude because it goes by the heart. In Patanjali, he says, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga is the neutralization of the vortices. Vritti is vortex. The vortex of feeling. Chitta is feeling. The mon is situated at the top of the head. Buddhi is centered at the point between the eyebrows. Ahankara is centered in the ego. You notice how people, when they're proud, they're looking down their noses. That's because the tension in the neck pulls their head back. And feeling is centered in the heart. Now, women's problem is they get emotional. But if you can get your emotions under control and see things calmly, many times, for example, a man has had his wife say to him, I don't like this new partner. And he says, what do you mean? He came with the highest recommendations. She'll say, but there's none of this. There's something about him I don't feel right about. And one day the man wakes up and he finds that the partner has suddenly taken all the money and fled. So listen to your wives, men. When your wife speaks calmly, listen to her. And when your husband speaks impersonally, listen to him. Each has its own quality. Neither is better or worse than the other. At Ananda villages, we have no conflict or contest. We have as many women in charge as men, because each has its particular gift. But we must learn that these two must be balanced together. And how do we do that balance? I'm going to give you an interesting thought here. A Shudra is one who's gotten too far away from this duality, too far into it. When he gets a little bit more calm, then he becomes a Vaishya. So the caste system is really based on this duality. The more you are into duality, the more you are into ignorance and unknowing. Krishna says that the worst of sinners, if he steadfastly meditates upon me, quickly comes to me. This is to say that you are not your caste according to how you were born. You can come out of that caste very quickly. A Shudra can become a Brahmin, at least theoretically. And you are not a Brahmin because your father was a Brahmin. The caste system is really the races of mankind. Black and brown and white and yellow and so on. These have nothing to do with it. That's just the color of your skin. But what you are, whether as a stupid person who doesn't really think much, which is identified as a peasant, it's only because peasants usually are not thinking people. But there are plenty of very intelligent and wise peasants. A Vaishya is usually a merchant, but he doesn't have to be. A Vaishya can be anything. He can be a Brahmin trying to get money out of people. So it depends on where you are. When you have reached the level of awareness that you understand that you find more happiness in giving than in taking from people, then you become a Kshatriya. Kshatriya is normally a soldier. Why a soldier? Because a soldier, I mean, there are plenty of crude soldiers, but ideally a soldier is one who is willing to share his life, give up his life for the welfare of his fellow man. And so a true ruler should be a Kshatriya in the sense of living to serve people. A true king is not one who takes. He's not like Rama, who shares with others, who lives dharmically. And a Brahmin, finally, because a Kshatriya reaches that point where he understands that I'm not happy until I share with the people. But then you understand at first giving people food, giving people money, it's okay to give them money, but they run out of it sooner or later. Much better to give them a job. And they may have a job and still not be happy. The greatest thing to give people is happiness. And if you really want to share happiness in the highest way, you have to share the happiness that is God, Satchidananda. And when you have been able to give that, then you become a Brahmin. So a true Brahmin is not a priest. He's somebody who wants to share God with other people and to share that bliss with other people. When you have this balance within yourself, then suddenly you see things in a very different way. For example, when you get centered in yourself, then you see that other people they're all like you. You see that everybody in the world wants bliss. Everybody wants happiness. Even the worst mafioso is only doing what he does because he thinks it'll give him happiness. The only thing wrong with it is that it doesn't give him happiness. And so we have to go through many, many incarnations before we finally understand that to live God and to share God with other people is what we want. I remember when I was a young man, I was 20, and I didn't used to think about God much because I thought that the God I heard about in the churches just sort of, it didn't interest me. I wanted to find truth. And what did God have to do with truth? And so I was thinking of doing it through science, through politics, through upliftment of mankind, through the arts to find inspiration. But I found that every one of those ways was a dead end. And I reached the point finally of understanding that without God, there cannot be truth. And I remember one night in Charleston, South Carolina, I was 21 years old, and I went out into the darkness, and I asked myself, if there's a God, what must he be? He can't be a policeman or a judge waiting for us to make a mistake so he can throw us into hell. That didn't make any sense to me. And I thought, well, what is making me ask this question? And I thought it's because I'm conscious. And if I'm conscious, he has to be consciousness. Then my goal in life has to be to find God. And I remember I was just overwhelmed by the grandeur of this discovery. And I thought, am I going crazy? I didn't know the lives of saints. I didn't know anybody before me had ever sought God. And I thought, maybe I need to get back to the country. And I went back to the countryside and tried to find the beauty of nature and tried to be inspired by that. And I'd look at the rainbow on a leaf in a little dewdrop. I'd say, that's beautiful, but I can't feel it. I said, I've just got to change myself. And I remember my father was in Esso, and he was sent as an oil geologist to Egypt. It was entirely God's way of giving me a chance to completely change my life. The very day that I put my mother on the ship to go join him, this is in 1948 when they didn't fly. And the very day I put her on the ship, I went uptown New York, and I discovered Autobiography of a Yogi. It absolutely changed my life. I didn't know anything about Indian philosophy. I didn't know anything about gurus. I didn't know anything about anything. But what he wrote in that book was so absolutely compelling that I said, I've got to become his disciple. And I went across the country by bus. And when I reached Los Angeles, I said, I want to be your disciple. And he made me his disciple right then. He said, I give you my unconditional love. Well, I suppose I must have been with him a long time for him to give me that promise. But I've been with him now for 64 years. And I have to say that I cannot imagine a more wonderful life. All my life has been dedicated to serving him and to serving his mission. And this mission is to help you to understand a whole new approach to Sanatana Dharma. Just as Buddha had to come in the around 500 BC in order to bring people out of the thought of Maya, out of the thought of worshipping the devatas, into the thought of realizing we have to do it ourselves. And then Shankaracharya came and explained that we're not atheists. People who followed Buddha became atheists, but Buddha was not an atheist. He was just saying, this is what you've got to do in order to find God. And in that, he taught Satchidanandam. Satchidananda is God, is the definition of God. This is what Yogananda is teaching today. But he's teaching it in a new way. He's teaching it in such a way that even today, people think too much of Ganesha, Saraswati. That's all very good, but you've got to do the effort to change yourself. This is where yoga comes in. You've got to do the effort to offer yourself up to God. You don't have to pray for God to do things for you. You know, I don't like to pray for myself. In fact, I won't pray for myself. I remember one time, quite a few years ago, it was Sunday morning. I was supposed to give the service on Sunday at our temple. And at 11 o'clock, at 9 o'clock, all of a sudden I was hit by a kidney stone attack. Those of you who have had them know how very, very painful they are. And my body was just shaking like a leaf. I wouldn't pray for myself. People kept saying, we've got to take you to a doctor. I said, I can't go. I'm in too much pain to travel. But I couldn't speak. And for 2 hours, I just crouched over my bed, just shaking in pain. But I would not ask Divine Mother to help me. And then finally I said, well, I looked at my watch and I saw it was 11:15. I was supposed to be giving the service in 15 minutes. I said, Divine Mother, if you want me to give this service, you've got to do something about this. Just this quickly, it all vanished. In that length of time, the time it takes me to wave a hand across my body, that pain was replaced by intense joy. I could hardly speak anyway, but at least I could speak somewhat. The thing is that if you pray to God, not for yourself, for your family to become healthy and wealthy and all those things, these are useless things. Why waste time on those things? This is what will keep you coming into this world again and again. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, get away from my ocean of suffering and misery. This ocean, yes, there's enough satisfaction for us to keep hoping. So we come back and again and again. But really, it gives you so much pain because the principle of Dvaita is that for every pleasure you experience, you've got to experience an opposite pain. So be centered in yourself. When you can do that, when I go to the dentist, I center myself in myself. I don't take painkiller. I just sit there and the dentist drills away and he may be sweating thinking of my pain, but I'm not feeling pain. Really, I'm sitting there composing music or working out some point of philosophy in a book of mine. But I have found that when I'm centered in myself, I don't feel pain in the same way. I had a dream just not long ago that I was being burned at the stake by enemies of mine. And I just thought, well, the pain won't last long. And this is a good thing to do when you feel pain. Just say, well, it won't last. Everything will go to its opposite in time. And so I just said, I'll endure it and it'll be fine. I'll be out of my body and I'll be very peaceful. Then my enemies were seated at a table. This is all a dream, remember. And they were all seated at a banquet table nearby. And they were feasting and enjoying and laughing and telling jokes. And I didn't pay any attention. And then some friends of mine came and rescued me. And they put out the fire and took me away. And I thought, it's all the same to me. If you can reach the point where everything is all the same, whether it's pain or pleasure, when things go right, don't do like people in TV ads who they've got a new kind of dress or a new kind of cup of coffee or whatever, and they're jumping up and down. Don't jump up and down, just be calm. When things go well, all right, but they won't continue. And it may seem like a gloomy approach, but this way you won't get hit when it does change. You'll always be calm and even-minded at all times. And the thing is that then you don't become indifferent. Your life doesn't become a bore for you. Quite the opposite. Then you find constant inner joy that nothing can touch. See, there's the joy of God, which never has an opposite, and the joy of the emotions, which are always going up and down. But when you have, the more you have of joy in yourself, the more your Ira and Pingala can be united. This is what the purpose of Kriya Yoga is. Through the movement of Kriya, you no longer see that sunset as this beautiful thing. You see it's your own ability to respond to the sunset and call it beautiful that makes you joyful. It's your ability to react to life that makes you feel good. And in this way, even the worst things can happen to you. One time, years ago, I bought a dictation machine. And the man recorded into it to make sure it was working, then he put it in my pocket. And I went to the symphony in New York. And Raphael Kubelet, the worst of it was that I gave him Kriya in Australia years earlier. Anyway, he was conducting the symphony orchestra. And he reached a pause between two movements of the Moldau. And I thought, well, let's see if this thing works, not just as a dictation machine, but recording at a distance. So I pushed the button. I pushed the wrong button. Hello, testing, 1, 2. And this voice filled the whole hall. I was horrified. I had turned the volume up, and the conductor whirled around like this. But he got to 4 before I finally turned off the button, finally found where it was. Well, these supreme moments of embarrassment sometimes come in our lives. I hope you're never that embarrassed. But at the same time, I thought, with congratulations, this will make a great story to tell. So in everything, there's always some compensation. You know, Benvenuto Cellini, he was a famous sculptor and artist in Italy some centuries ago. And the Pope asked him to do a new sculpture for him. And Cellini said, you haven't paid me for the last one. The Pope said, never mind, do it now. And Cellini said, I won't. Well, you don't say, I won't to the Pope. So the Pope had all the power. He put him in prison. And Cellini later described this condition. He was in this dungeon. There were rats running everywhere. Everything was wet. His mattress was wet. He couldn't get dry. It was cold. And there was enough light up above for him to read 1 hour a day. So he read the Bible. And he spent the whole time praying. And after 2 weeks, when the Pope finally brought him out, he said, if you want to know what true joy is, then arrange to be in a dungeon with all the negative conditions you can imagine. Rats running over the floor, starving, no food, cold, everything wrong. But pray to God. And you will find that when you can pray to God in all circumstances, you will find the sheerest delight in doing so. I didn't know this when I first came to Yogananda, but I've learned this, and it's a very important thing to understand. You get so upset because little things go wrong at the office, because maybe you burned some food, maybe some little thing went wrong and a neighbor got angry with you for something. So many causes people have for getting angry. Absolutely useless. Don't get angry. We only get angry because things don't go the way we want them to. Give up wanting. You'll find that the more you can live centered in yourself, the more you can get rid of the desires that it be this or that, the more you'll find always you're at peace. But one trick to that is understanding that when you see a beautiful sunset, you're feeling the beauty and the joy of it in yourself. You're not feeling it in the sunset. A turtle could look at the same sunset and not feel happy, might think it was something to eat or something. You have this joy within yourself. Your reaction comes from here, not from out there. And so the more you can learn to react from in your heart and understand that it's your reaction that does it, the more this is the Ida rising. Every time you see something you like, you know the breathing in this astral body is within the spine. They don't have lungs. They don't have air the way we do. But when you inhale in the astral body, energy comes up the Ida. And when it goes down through Pingala. And when these two become balanced, then you become entranced in deep meditation. So, learning to react to everything, make up your mind today, I'm going to enjoy myself. No matter what goes wrong, I'm going to enjoy myself as this world is. So that when you see things becoming difficult for you, just say, it's okay, I don't mind. You'll be surprised how much you can take if this world if you don't feel your happiness is outside. As I said, when I go to the dentist, I don't take Novocaine, I don't take painkiller. I just think of myself as centered here. And one time the pain was too great, and so my energy I had spread my energy out over the whole countryside. And then where was the pain? There's the one little body over here. It just didn't matter. Everything depends upon your mental resolution. And when you can live a balanced life, I'm not talking just balancing work with meditation, with all that. That's important, but it's self-evident. But you can be balanced in yourself by reducing duality to your own inner center. That is where God is. God is at your heart. This is why the heart, chitta, is the most important thing to overcome. When we can overcome this thought that we are pleased or displeased by anything, you find that you're always pleased. Again and again in my life. I remember when I was, this is before I even came onto the spiritual path, but I suppose I'd been born with certain samskaras. Anyway, I was 13 years old and I weighed 107 pounds. I was new in America and I had a very English accent. And there was a boy there who was 15 and he weighed 230 pounds, more than twice as many as I did. And he decided he didn't like my accent. In fact, he didn't like anything about me. And I remember him sitting next to me at the table and telling me what I was doing wrong. Don't you realize you should take your soup out of the far end of the far side of the bowl, peasant? And I just didn't say anything. I just ate calmly. He said, boy, am I ever going to get you. And I knew he meant it. We didn't have locks on our doors. And he came charging into my room later and threw me on the floor, on the bed, and just beat me up. And there was nothing I could do. He kept saying, I'm going to throw you out the window, I'm going to throw you out the window. we were 3 stories up. I just decided that there's nothing I could do, so I'd take it quietly, and after a while he became exhausted and left. But he never touched me again. If you are calm, even the greatest bully will leave you alone. He won't be able to get you where your heart is afraid. And the same is true with this world. As it tries to hurt you, if you remain untouched, it will not be able to hurt you. Remember the saying, the statement that was made by a yogi when Emperor Alexander came to India, and he heard about these yogis, and he was intrigued, and he sent to one yogi. He said that my Majesty wants that you come to see him. If you come, he will cover you with riches. If you don't come, he'll take your head off. And the yogi said, if the riches he promised me don't mean anything to me. If he wants my head, he can have it. He's welcome to it. I'm not attached to this body. And finally, Alexander had to go to him. But when you are completely calm in yourself, you'll find that no matter what difficulties come, not only will you be calm, but another side of the coin will kick in. God will take care of you. You know, there is a very interesting thing that in the Second World War, when they dropped the atom bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan, ending the war, there were 2 spiritual communities living near the epicenter of both those cities, where those bombs fell. They were untouched, believe it or not. They were spiritual communities. One was Franciscan, the other was Jesuit. But the more you live in God, the more you love God and think of Him, the more He will take care of you. You don't have to worry about it. There's a book I read very recently about the saving power of angels. Same thing. It's all God's power finally. But this woman was going home, and just between her and her apartment, there was a man who was looking very uncomfortably at her. And she just prayed for help and walked by, and the man didn't touch her. But shortly afterwards, she heard a loud commotion, and she went out into the street. He had raped the woman who came after her. And somebody said, well, this woman came before, why didn't you rape her? He said, are you kidding, with those 2 huge guys that are standing on each side of them? She didn't know any guys were standing near her. They were angels. You will find that angels and God will protect you. I had a very interesting thing told to me by an alpinist. He made many first ascensions in Switzerland, but on one of them, he studied for a while and he thought, well, I can go up this. But he came almost to the top when he found there was a ledge there. But after that, it curved outward. There was no way he could climb up. There was no way he could go down. It was difficult enough to come up. He had no choice before him except to sit there and starve to death. Nobody could have heard him, nothing. And so he said, well, better die trying than die just by not using my will. So he started to climb. As soon as he got upside down, he fell. Climb, fell. Climb, fell. He was bruised all over. But he said, I'll just keep trying. About the 25th time, suddenly, instead of falling to the ground, this force pushed him against the mountain, and he was able to climb up to the top and walk down easily on the other side. But there are forces that will help you in the most extreme cases. You will find help if you love God and if you live in your inner center. So what I'm telling you today has the most important practical advantages. It's very important to understand the more you live in God. We're coming to a time now of very serious depression. It will be much worse than the 1930s, much worse. And although the depression will begin in America, it's going to hit the whole world. Money won't be worth the paper it's printed on. What will you do just not very long ago in Chicago, in Detroit rather, when they had a strike there and they tried to bring money into the inner city so that the people living there could be fed. They had to come with 2 men with guns on each side of the truck to protect it from the mobs outside. What will it happen when trucks can't get into the inner cities? We will have a very Great Depression. It will lead to war. And here in India, well, what can you think? You've got Pakistan backed by China. That will give Pakistan the courage to try. It's not going to be easy in this country. It won't be easy anywhere. But if you love God, if you think of Him, He will protect you. And this is the most important thing. Another very important thing is to get land where you can grow your own food. Food is going to be impossible to get. But if you have a place where you grow your own food, where a community would be best. We've started such a community in Pune, near Pune, in Watunde, a little village. And I would urge you to come and live there. And I would like this to be the first of many such communities. Yogananda said that in time, this community's idea would spread like wildfire throughout the world. When people are starving, that's what they will do. Either that or they will starve to death, and there are going to be many people who starve to death. But it will be possible. Mind you, in the last century, in our times, there have been great depressions, hyperinflation. Germany in 1923, the mark was worth nothing. Argentina went through a period of hyperinflation. It's going to come. And I urge you to seriously think about starting a community or joining our community. I tell you, I started a community. We have 9 communities now. But the first was not easy to start. Everybody wanted it this way, no this way, no this way, no this way. I had only to open my mouth for 10 people to jump into it. But now that we've established, and it has certain principles that it follows. One is that people are more important than things. And the other is yata dharma, stata jaya. Where you live according to dharma, there you will have victory. And I lived according to dharma throughout those years of getting it started. And I find now that we have a wonderful community. People who go there are overwhelmed by the kindness and cooperation they meet everywhere. If you have a village of 1,000 people, and each one is competing with others, each will have 999 enemies. If each is cooperating with the other, you'll have 999 friends. This is what we have in our Ananda communities. This is what I would like you to see. If you start a community, base it on this community, a system that works. And then you can say to newcomers who come, this is the system we're following. Take it or leave it. It's easy that way. It was much easier starting other communities after the first one was started. But above all, come to us and help us to get started on this community. You will find that it's a wonderful way of life. Everybody is your friend. Nobody is unkind. Everybody is peaceful and loving and happy. This is how life should be. And yet, how often life is not like that. So if you can live a balanced life, if you can balance yourself and not have likes or dislikes, just be calm and centered in yourself, you will find that everything you want comes to you. God works from within, not from without. When you're looking for what you want outside yourself, you'll always find, like that story of when Yashoda wanted to tie Krishna when he was a little baby, and she went and got some string to tie him up. There was just as much string lacking. So she got more string and more string. There's always just as much lacking. And then she understood and she said, Lord, please help me, let me tie you up. But if you can do it the right way, you find there's no problem. If you do it in God and for God, I found that everything has gone right. Even the most difficult times in my life, I found everything is just beautiful. Just a year ago, I was in a hospital, in an intensive care unit down in Pune. And I had wire all over me. It looked like I was covered with spaghetti. And the doctors and nurses would come to me with this worried look, how are you? I said, just wonderful. I think the main thing is that we must not be afraid of dying. You know, when you die, you're going to be very happy. There's no pain in death. There's nothing but release. Yes, if you have desires for anything, you'll have to come back and fulfill those desires. But it's this body that gives you your trouble. It's not that world. So don't be afraid of death. And when you can be free of death, you'll find that the saying, yata dharma tata jaya, works. You will be able to live dharmically then. So, again, to tell you about this book of mine, do please get it. Because it's the demystifying Patanjali. I wrote this book in just 3 weeks, but it's really the lifetime of living with my Guru and living for my Guru that has made this understanding possible. I know that if you want to know about yoga, you'll love this book. God bless you all. We have the choir singing, if you'll come up here. And I will sing you a song too, but
Did you want to sing first, Swami?
yeah, no, you sing first. What are you going to sing? No, I'll sing first. Okay, sorry about that confusion. Love is all I know. Are we all right? Oh, sorry. Start over again.
Sorry.
Love is all I know. Sun rays on the snow of a winter long in darkness without song. Oh, my heart's afire, burning all desire, only you remain and light again. Too long I did stray, flung lifetimes away, imagine you did not care. I know now your smile was mine all the while, I listened and love was there. I can't breathe for love, all the stars above call to me, come home. Life's waves all end in foam, only love can heal all the pain I feel. What a fool was I to turn away. And now please stand. Now we'll sing a song that I'd like everybody to stand for. Light within us shining, has shone where freedom lies, from earthly walls confining, to soar in spirit skies. How oft like sheep we've strayed apart, bless you all.